my tomato growing is not really about maximizing yield. I already got my perfect tomato for the season. It's all gravy at this point.
This is 5 to 9, a podcast where we discover the hidden passions and hobbies that engineering, product, and technology leaders obsess over when the workday ends.
Gian, thank you so much for being here early in the morning here. Appreciate you. If you don't mind, maybe you could share a little bit about you, what your thing is, and then we'll jump into the fun stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Gian Perrone. I'm the VP of engineering at NAV. Basically, small business focused fintech.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. But the real reason we have you here is to actually talk about a thing I heard about you did, or I heard somewhere in your lineage did, which was smuggled tomatoes. And so I wanted to, I was super into this, with just the headline alone. Well, because for me, we run a small garden in the backyard, and my in-laws help me out with it every once in a while. But, my general thing around growing things in the backyard either has to be something you use really frequently, something you can't get at a regular market, or something that just tastes way more delicious than you buy at a market, right? And tomatoes definitely fit the triple bill, or at least double bill. You will use them a lot when they're good. You can get some quirky ones that you can't get at the store so often, and then they just taste so good at that perfect time. And so, I'm here in Boston, and what is this? Almost November here, and it's we're about to get to mealy tomato season. But when that September tomato hits, it's so good. So when you said you had the special ones, I wanted to hear about it. So, anyways, what's the context?
Yeah, probably similar to you in some ways. I'm just a little picky about tomatoes, but there's a lot of family history with them, as you can maybe tell by the slightly ridiculous name. I'm from an Italian background. My grandfather came from Italy to New Zealand, where I was raised, and was a tomato grower. That was his profession, and so they brought some seeds from sort of where they were, sort of Naples area, effectively, and they started growing those in New Zealand commercially, and that was his profession. And then it moved to my uncle when my grandfather retired, and so I would get sent down for school holidays to go pick tomatoes. Thankfully, I didn't have to do it too many years, but
Teach me a little geography here, because you said silly. I think it's great. Just orient me. Where is Naples, and orient me in the shape of New Zealand, and where's where.
The Italian side of the family is Naples, Italy, and then they moved to the sort of the top end of the South Island in New Zealand, and that region it's warm. I mean, it's grapes, wine growing, it's the Marlborough region. Basically, if you've ever bought some New Zealand supermarket wine, and they also grow a lot of produce like tomatoes and things like that. But that was sort of a very nascent thing, I guess, when my grandparents arrived, and even the idea of sort of commercial cultivation of these more like Roma tomatoes, San Marzanos, that was just unheard of in New Zealand. The New Zealand palate was not particularly cosmopolitan. So that was kind of the impetus for all of that, or me getting involved in tomato growing, was really just having to pick them.
Summer job, after school job. Yeah.
Right.
What age were you when you were doing this?
Oh, probably 10 through 13 or something.
Okay.
Yeah, I started getting coding jobs later. Yeah. You got to handpick them. I mean, it's just sort of I'm sure there was a whole level of sophistication going on that I wasn't really privy to, in terms of my my uncle working maintaining the plants and things like that.
Yeah.
But I was just there with a basket early in the morning and going down the rows picking the right ones.
Love it. And so this southern hemisphere, so this would be our April, right? Would be tomato season, or would it be?
Yeah, I mean, they had heated greenhouses, so
Okay.
this was probably Christmas through kind of April, something like that.
Okay, got it. And this is okay. So San Marzanos and some Romas, and take it from there. I interrupted you.
Yeah, no. So the particular variety that came over from Italy with my grandfather is Isle of Capri. It's a indeterminate tomato, so it's a little bit like a San Marzano. Very few seeds. Quite a sort of fleshy, a little bit of a beefsteak quality. So anyway, became the platonic ideal of a tomato to me, because they're fresh right off the vine. They're everything and my grandparents' house was always cooked with those, and my grandmother's cooking was this. So I became kind of, that was the ideal tomato to me. And then as I moved around the world and things like that, I was really disappointed by tomatoes everywhere I went. Um,
Me too.
so I set out to try and grow a tomato, but the $64 tomato. You're familiar with this concept, right? Of like,
No. Well, what's
oh,
that?
it was a book about a guy, sort of this home gardening trap people fall into, where like, once you get all the equipment and everything, and the obsession takes over, and then you end up with the actual like yield of fruit. Each
Yeah.
tomato is like $64, I think is the idea. And I was like, I think I can do better than that. I think I can have like $128 tomato.
Yeah, dude, you're a fintech guy. You could do this. You could amp it up.
Yeah, it's like, why do things by halves? So yeah, I mean, it's just been backyard gardening. I moved from San Francisco to Wisconsin. I gotta say, the lack of wildfire smoke has improved my yields, even though the climate's a little less forgiving and the growing season's a lot shorter.
Yeah, very tight growing season, right? Like you got to get,
Yeah,
you got to like, when's first frost come? First frost probably comes in kind of early October for you guys, something like that.
it was actually today,
Okay,
funnily enough. Yeah.
we timed
Um,
it perfectly. We kill all the plants today.
yeah, they're like, I'm looking out the window at them. I think they're sort of holding up. I can probably go grab a bit of fruit. It was a light frost.
Got it. Well, so tell me, what's your ritual? So, when do you plant? Like, what seeds? And like, I'm kind of baiting this one, but like, what do you actually like? Oh, give me the technique. Give me the technology here.
Yeah, so I start seeds under a grow light in my basement. Sometimes I'll start them in a couple batches, just because the last frost can be a little time sensitive, or rather a little hard to predict sometimes.
Yeah.
So probably somewhere between like late February through about mid March, I've usually got seed trays. So yeah, I through means that I couldn't possibly speculate on, I ended up with some of the Isle of Capri
Uh huh.
seeds
Uh huh. Uh huh.
that made their way from Italy to New Zealand for a few generations, and then now are somehow here.
Not sure how. Not
Could
sure
could have been
how.
anything.
Could have been anything.
Yeah. And wind patterns, I'm sure something like that. And so I grow a decent number of those. I usually try and aim for maybe like 30 or 40 plants, and then I'll throw in usually like a San Marzano and maybe some like cherry tomatoes or something. I I've gone more monoculture, just because cross sort of pollination means you don't necessarily end up with like true type. You end up with perfectly nice tomatoes, but they're not necessarily the varietal you planted.
You're generally doing Isle of Capri. Is this from your, is this because this is your youth tomato, or have you committed to this one, or how do you think about that? And what do you do
Yeah,
with
yeah,
them,
no.
right? Like, why those?
Yeah. So primarily, I'll make passata out of them. I'll sauce, basically puree them. So I've got a whole sort of electric puree rig, which is it's a fun little ritual. I'll can them, and then that's I don't buy canned tomatoes or anything like that. So yeah, I enjoy cooking.
In theory, these are the same tomatoes that your grandfather like brought from Naples over to New Zealand. The seeds from those, like, have been carried over generations. Somehow these seeds made their way parallel with you to somewhere in Wisconsin. That in theory you're growing them over months here, starting in February, get them in September. That has the same taste and flavor that your grandfather had, probably, and probably the same sauce flavor you've been eating, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I would say, I'm sure there's a lot of like soil conditions and all sorts of stuff that it means it's not precisely the same. And the memory of youth is fickle, right? So who knows? Who knows if it's the perfect tomato? But it's what it's the high I'm chasing.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I'm with you, actually. Food memories are so ingrained, and like, I actually think yes, they're romanticized, but they're like this. They're powerful when they hit. So I totally
Yeah.
get what you're saying here. Well, tell me about the setup. So you got basement LED grow lights, rigs, like give me the end to end. Like, what's the mechanics here?
Yeah, yeah. So the start and seed trays, basically, I will start with seeds I've saved, and sometimes, as I said, I'll if there's some other varieties I like, sow them in seed trays. The seedlings are pretty self-sufficient. They're just under grow lights. All you got to do is sort of move the grow light around a little bit as they grow, so not to burn the tops.
And these days they're LED grow lights these days, right? They're no longer like those
Yeah,
big old high electric yield kind of things.
yeah, they still throw out a decent amount of heat, so they can definitely scorch the tops of the young seedlings. Then it's just a matter of starting to repot them because they'll basically grow to a height that's sort of proportional to the pot they're in.
Okay. Okay.
So I'll repot into, they start in seed trays that are like a couple inches deep, and then repot into sort of a, you know larger and larger, successively larger pots over, maybe the next month or two.
Oh, so that takes us into like March, April, right, or something like that.
Yeah, it's probably most of April we're still in pots. It's one of these things where like you can get into polytunnel setups and trying to plant out earlier. I tend to just get them into decent sized pots or even grow bags, and they're up to
what does polytunnel mean? It's
oh,
teaching me.
like a polythene tunnel, like a
Oh,
kind of temporary greenhouse type
okay.
setup, just where you can keep the frost off them.
So how big do you think we're getting before you put them on the ground? I know you can't control when the last frost is, but like roughly.
Yeah, they're probably like a foot and a half by the time they're going in. Yeah, I'm letting them go pretty far in the bags, often just because it's day by day. Like, oh, okay, no temps start, because you really do want the soil temperatures pretty far up. So by the time I've been able to go out and dig the garden and plant in, I really like things like leafy greens and stuff that's a little more frost tolerant.
Yeah.
Tomatoes are still just sort of doing their thing. I'll start hardening them off where you gotta, I'll lug them up from the basement. It's quite a time consuming process, and
Yeah.
set them out in the sun for, increasingly long time. So, just an hour or two sort of initially, and then they start staying out there most of the day, and then
Wow.
they're coming in at night.
For a layman, because I still go to my local garden store. Sometimes I might go to the Home Depot, but like, well, I mean, it sounds yours are hardier. You're doing all this work. They're bigger. Like, what's the difference? Like, if I could do all the work, like, would I get stronger plants? All this stuff.
Uh, I don't know. I mean, this is just, I think, kind of the process of growing from seed,
Okay.
particularly just for anything that's a little, temperature sensitive.
Yeah.
I don't do this with my lettuces, put it that way.
Got it. Well, so if you're bringing them up and down every day, like, help me understand the scale. Like, how many plants and in there are you planting out there? We're talking like five. We're talking 500. What are we talking here?
No, I probably start the season with like at least 40, which is about what I try to get probably
40.
into the ground. Yeah. I like, they don't all survive, right? I like to have some backups to swap, and I tend to give away a lot of seedlings at this
Yeah.
stage because everyone else wants to plant something, so it's pretty easy to give away the runts of the litter.
Yeah.
And yeah, so maybe I'd say maybe it's about like 30 plants is what I end up with, sort of in beds in the garden.
I'm thinking about the amount of space that would take because I grow mine in these kind of grow buckets that are
Yep.
like, that have the auto feed that I drip into it so that like I've got a drip feeder into there just so I can kind of set it and forget it kind of thing.
Right.
But like that puts two per like Tupperware thing that's like, the size that I can hug. And if you're talking 30, I mean, I just think there's a lot of space out there. Yeah. Like it's in the ground, right? It's not, or is it raised beds or is it buckets or what are we doing? Yeah.
Yeah, raised beds. So I've got uh, 5 beds that are about 12. I think they're 12 feet by about 3 feet. So I've got a lot of space, and that's not just for the tomatoes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's mostly that I try to keep, yeah, like the Isle of Caprese and the other varieties sort of separate so that they do come out true to type.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you end up with some weird hybrids, which they could be interesting, they could be good, but it's not what I'm trying to grow.
I'm interested. Like, so this means like 30 once each of these things must push like 100 fruit at some point, something like that, at least.
Yeah, it's a decent yield. I'd say it's pretty dependent on the watering cycle in terms of
Yeah.
just how productive they end up early. We can get big storms here, and the temperatures can sort of chill off again right through June. So it can be a little touch and go. But no, I'd say it's more tomatoes than I would know what to do with if I didn't have
The
the near
canning rig.
industrial, yeah, near
Yeah.
industrial production of canning.
I'm actually imagining you were in San Francisco before. You didn't like we're in the Bay where you can't. I can't even imagine where in the Bay you could have this kind of space to go do this.
Yeah, no, I wasn't doing the scale of production in San Francisco. I had a little backyard in the Castro, and it was just grow bags. The last year, I guess it was COVID year, and this is like full disclosure, right? COVID gardening made this obsessive. Like it was just toss some seeds in the in a grow bag and walk away kind of thing. But then I had time on my hands. So
Yeah.
remember the year San Francisco had the red skies, the
Yeah,
fires, just no
yeah,
sun for
yeah.
years. Yeah, that basically killed off my tomatoes. That was right as they were going through their growth spurt, and they
Oh,
just did not love that, and they basically never recovered. It was kind of unfortunate. So that it's been a lot much smoother out here with a lot more space, a lot more consistent weather, and
yeah.
less wildfires.
No, we yeah, I mean, like, I think the pandemic definitely gave us new rituals that we do. But like, I mean, like, okay, so now the plants are in the ground. You're like,
Yep.
what are we doing? Are we like mulching on top of this thing? Are we putting compost in, fertilizer? What's the mix in here in the ground? Like, how do you are you just using that like regular dirt that you're kind of sprucing up, or what are you doing here?
No, I mean the tomatoes are. I mean they're heavy feeders, so I feel like you got to be doing something. I have a compost bin that I just put like kitchen and garden
Yeah.
waste into. So that goes in the fall, effectively into the beds. Gets to break down all winter under some snow here, and that's about all I do. Occasionally I'll mess a little bit with some of the like acidic fertilizers.
Okay.
Um,
So you're not putting a little generic 10-10-10 fertilizer in there or anything like that, or you're just letting it run.
no, sometimes later in the growing season I'll give them a
Yeah.
little bit of something. I'm not an organic farmer,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the main thing is just getting them sort of staked up. I feel like I've screwed that one up a few times of like cheap Home Depot stakes. Well, these are all indeterminate varieties as well, so they're going to keep growing. I mean, these they'll be 8 feet tall by the end of the growing season. So you need a lot of stakes.
Teach me about the word indeterminate, right? Like, and like not just what it means, but like what are the implications of such?
Yeah, so tomatoes are either determinate or indeterminates. The determinates basically are things like romas, which will grow a bush, but they will stop growing. They're sort of self-limiting. At some point, they're like, "I'm done. Thank you very much," and they stop growing. They stop producing fruit. Indeterminates are vining tomatoes that will just keep growing until they're killed by frost or disease, basically.
Okay.
So you tend to get a much higher yield, I'd say, but they're much more finicky plants.
How do you
They're
know
very particular.
beforehand? Like certain seeds, certain varietals are indeterminate, and then like
Yeah,
certain ones are.
yeah.
Okay.
There's no way to know, at least not with my botanical skills, except just reading it.
And figuring out where it goes and grows.
Yeah,
And when you say staking up, so I'm used to actually those circular tomato cages,
yeah.
but it sounds like that's not what you mean. What do you mean by staking and stuff like that?
No, it would probably by the time they're sort of like in the ground a couple weeks, they would just outgrow those cages. So like, I'm on big metal stakes these days. Like they're probably 8 or 9 feet. They're big, and
Right.
then
So just big metal
dry
8 or 9 foot poles you put in the ground, and you kind of like tape the plants to it or something like that.
Yeah, I've sort of tried every system for like tomato clips or twine, or there's like tomato tape and Velcro ones. I've no, I just use whatever I've got basically.
So how do you drive them in? Like, are you on a ladder putting these things in, or
Oh
like?
yeah, it's very awkward. Yeah, perched on the edge of the raised bed, trying to swing a hammer, or falling off, stepping in the
Yeah.
bed. It's a mess. Yeah, I don't have a good system for that. I've been kind of thinking about trying to build a frame around
Yeah.
the edge of the bed, so I just haven't got around to it yet.
This is crazy. Okay, so now I'm managing this stuff. So then, what's the runtime maintenance of this? So take me from like May till fruiting time. Like,
Yeah.
is it every morning you get up? Play some classical music to them. Like
Yeah.
like what's the vibe? What's the rhythm? And how do you water them? Like, what's the ritual?
Yeah, the main thing is sort of single stemming them, because they will put out laterals, right? They'll
Yeah.
put out the suckers, and so I pinch them all off and single stem them up the
Just keep
the
letting
stem.
it go. Just
Yeah,
like
they just keep going up. Yeah, and so water wise, I put them on drip watering. I've kind of experimented with that a little bit because, as I say, that they can end up kind of waterlogged a bit, and even in raised beds. So for me, it's maybe 3 times a week watering, and you got to get your drippers adjusted to the right flow rates and things like
yeah.
that. But I'd say I've got no great science for this, except like I kind of know like it's about maybe 45 minutes of watering 3 times a week on my
Okay,
drippers.
so it's a feel. Okay, so it's not like you don't have, because they now have all those. You can put probes in the thing, and you can actually have feedback loops and all that kind
Yeah,
of stuff to get it right.
I stick my finger in the dirt and kind of
Okay.
yeah, that's about it.
I mean,
Um,
I found the same thing, by the way, that every couple days makes it, like, for a while I was actually having it daily and it was just too moist on that stuff, and then like
well,
slowing it down.
and you'll notice it in the flavor of the tomatoes. They'll end up kind of like those waterlogged supermarket, mealy supermarket
Yeah.
tomatoes. No, I
Ah,
think they definitely need to go through a kind of a bit of a. You don't want them to dry completely, but they do need to dry out pretty well. Top layers of soil are dry, and then because if it gives them time to uptake nutrients.
it probably concentrates the flavor too, because I'm thinking sometimes my cherry tomatoes, they grow too fast and they crack themselves, right? They pop out and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So that's also where you can flush, I think, a lot of the calcium out of the soil, and that's what leads to skin formation going where you get blossom and rot and cracking and things like that. So I've definitely had problems with that, and it's sort of been a process of dialing that in. But that's very much a per varietal thing too. Like some
That's a
varietals don't
okay.
care,
It's
some
a
do.
calcium deficiency. Now I'm thinking, okay, right when
Yeah,
they, I get this black, every once in a while this black blight comes through, like later in the season, like, and that sucks because then there's the whole plant just like, or I mean, a lot of the fruit just gets tossed, and you're like looking at it, you're like, I've invested this time, and I see the black spot on you. It doesn't matter like what happens here, it's doomed, right? Is that a
yeah. I've not had too many problems. So the in terms of like late blight,
yeah,
um, the only thing that seems to forestall it is just is ventilation. So
yeah,
I trim lower stalks like way up,
yeah,
pretty aggressively. Like so, there's about 2 feet of basically just stem, and then you get some branch. And so I'm pretty aggressive about thinning, just so they're getting airflow through.
yeah.
Because like soil splash up into those lower leaves is how I think a lot of those soil-borne diseases get
Yeah,
transmitted.
once it hits, it's just like it's all through
Right.
the things. And yes, okay. So this is cool. Okay, so your ritual is you're gonna get this thing on an auto drip thing. You're gonna come out here like how often? Like daily? You're gonna check and pinch the. You said suckers, like the little branches that come off it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the little hours. I wish it was daily. I'd say in more leisurely work times, it would have been daily, but now it's probably a couple times a week.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. And then at a certain point, you can stop doing that because they're not going to do that anymore, right? Or in the indeterminates, they keep going.
no, they'll keep doing it pretty much to the end of the season. Like once they've kind of given up, it's usually the temperatures are dropping and the fruit yields have really slowed down. But like there's still green fruit on my tomato plants, and it's end of October.
What are you going to do? Are you going to pull them for like a bunch of fried green to pickle them, or like at some point they just like they freeze and they'll rot, right? The whole thing.
Yeah, no, I've got to grab them in. It's generally like you can shove them in a paper bag and a lot of them will come ripe. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'd say there's some wastage in this. Hence where my tomato growing is not really about maximizing yield. I already got my perfect tomato for the season. It's all gravy at this point.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so it's kind of cool. Cool. I mean, I think a silver lining here of like a little extra time because the pandemic put you into this. But actually, once you're describing the rhythm here of what you're doing, like I'm kind of like, oh, that's not so bad. Like, what's the step function here for like because it sounds like it can fit into your regular life now, even though we're all running around and stuff like that more.
Yeah.
Like what was the what like to go from like a guy who goes to Home Depot and gets a plant and feels pretty proud about it. Like, what's the step function to go to where you are?
Yeah, I think I mean doing them from seed, I'm not sure there's actually a huge benefit unless there's a
Unless
particular
there's
variety you
special
want. But
seeds, yeah.
yeah, no, exactly. Like unless there's something you just can't get at Home Depot. I know the step function is probably just a watering setup and yeah, probably grow lights. Like that's kind of the main thing. Some potting soil or seed starting soil.
By the way, your drip, do you have just set up to faucet on and off, or do you actually have some kind of fancy iPhone-based timer kind of thing? Or like, how are you doing it?
It's an electronic timer, but it's just like dials you set. No phone app or anything. I did start down just in the vein of obsessions you get into. I did start down like the whole building an Arduino watering system,
Yeah, yeah.
controlling solenoid stuff. It was one of these things where I was like, this is stupid. This was meant to be fun, and I've turned it into an engineering project. Like this was my relaxing time away from the computer, and now I'm at my computer.
So now we got the fruit. So we're in September now. We're pulling, so we're picking like just like your 10-year-old self. Or do you make family members get at this, or like is it like a big old party? Like how do we do this?
No, no. I mean, it's a I mean, it's continuous fruit probably from like it depends on the season, late July, August,
Okay.
and it's just I'll just go out there. sometimes, between work calls or whatever, and take a bowl and just grab the 10 or 15 or so, whatever, ripe ones from that day. And then they'll sit. Usually I'll just stack them outside in the sun, basically, so that they can ripen up a bit further. If they're going to be sauced, I'll leave them a couple days.
Yeah.
If they're being eaten, they just go into my like fruit bowl in my kitchen, and they get used.
We've done this a month ago in the video, where we've done this in the garden with like just hear the rustling of the plants as you go through them. Well, so you pick them out, and then you like put them in a basket, and then like what's the saucing rig? You said earlier you have some industrial thing here.
Yeah, no, I mean it's an electric kind of it's a muesli type thing. So you basically got a metal funnel. You stew the tomatoes really quickly, mostly to just soften them up and get the skins to start separating. And it goes through this sort of electrically powered corkscrew mechanism that pushes it through a sieve. And all the skins and seeds sort of go one way out the end of the funnel, and the pulp comes out through the mesh. And that's the yield. That's the product for most stuff. I'll also sometimes just blanch the skins off some and can those as whole tomatoes and whatever else. But yeah, that's the main product, I'd say. And the yield is not great.
And you get all that stuff out. Is it in jars or is it in cans? And do you actually go through the actual act of jarring them at like high temperature and all stuff like that?
Yeah. So I mason jars, with the proper canning lids. I have a pressure canner. There's like, if you were to ask my dearly departed grandmother, like she lived to the ripe old age, never having high temperature canned any of this stuff.
Okay.
So like clearly worked for her. But our modern age of foodborne illness, I maybe I'm a little more paranoid. So I'm happy to can them, like pressure can them, just because it's shelf stable. Then they're great. They'll last a few years.
Yeah, okay, so the end of the year, like how many cans are we getting out of this? Because back to your $128 tomato, what are we getting here? Yeah,
it depends on the year, and it's mostly to do with like how much energy I have to do how many batches of this. So the tomato, the raw materials are not a problem, but I like probably 100 jars or something.
100 jars?
Yeah, I started giving them away, and like it certainly lasts me the winter, and like
yeah,
the first year I did this, I didn't have it.
Do you actually get through them?
The first year I ran out, so
Okay.
that's when I sort of put in more plants and started doing more. And then, so the next year I didn't. I don't think I made it through them all.
Yeah.
So I, still dialing it in, but I'd say I'm never really sad about having like more tomatoes.
I mean, these are big jars. You're like, these are like quart jars, kind of stuff like that, right? Or like big, bigger ones than that.
Yeah, no, the quart jars. Yeah, usually.
I mean, I disagree with you about $120 tomato. I mean, those like each a fancy jar of that thing would be like $8 of like San Marzano tomatoes, and you're making it's like $1,000 worth of stuff there. Right?
Yeah, it probably is, but I mean, it's probably a lot of tomatoes went into each one of those, and by the time you add
a lot of love, a lot
True.
of time. Yeah,
that's what makes them taste better. Yeah,
and a little and some mental sanity too, right? Like that's a so is this a cathartic thing for you at this point, or is it a thing that weighs in your shoulders now to do?
It can be a little bit of both. I gotta say, definitely when it started, it was a very therapeutic thing. I think when one year a storm knocked a lot of my tomatoes over, and it was I think everyone was a little worried about me. Like there's a lot of sort of concerned looks, the hand on the shoulder, like, are you okay? It's like no, I'm okay. But I'd say as I've sort of gotten busier and busier at work, it becomes a little bit of like I really need to go trim those tomatoes, or I need to go like dig that mulch out or whatever. And it's sort of, it becomes a little bit of a chore. But generally speaking, I'd say an excuse to sort of go outside, sun, fresh air. It's really good. So no, it's cathartic for sure.
Do you find, like, aside from the guilt of eating all this stuff, like, is the gardening at some point an outlet for you in terms of stress times? Do you find a correlation in your work patterns?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it is because it's such a short growing season here, right? There's this giant sort of gap where I notice like my emotional regulation changes in terms of my ability to handle stress. I just go when something's growing, it's great. Yeah, I'll go hand water some stuff, or do a bit of pruning or something totally cathartic. It's a good way to, I think, just kind of refocus a little, have a little moment to yourself. You and your plants, commune with nature. It's good.
I dig it. Right. And then like back to the whole thing around the gardening setup. So for where I live in the city, so I'm in Cambridge, and we definitely have our bionic squirrels and bunnies that tear everything up, and let's not even talk about the city rodents, but like we gotta do some work to fight all these things off. Do you have that out there? What do you use to kind of keep things away?
Yeah, I lose a decent number of usually the young plants to squirrels and rabbits in my yard. The funny thing is they don't even like eating them.
Yeah, they just like
Like
knock them out for
nightshade, right?
fun. Yeah,
They just chew them off for fun,
yeah.
sharpening their teeth. So I've kind of done various times. I'll throw up some netting around the raised beds for like at least that early part of the season, then generally sort of take them back down. Yet again, this is all like under time constraints. So sometimes I'm just like, there's enough plants. It's fine. I'll plant a few extra, and like if the rabbits want to chew off a few of them, like fine.
Yeah, I like it. So we're talking about this. We're clearly geeking about this. Do you have other community about this stuff, or is there like a work garden channel, or do people think you're a crazy person when you talk about this stuff?
No, there's a work gardening channel, but no, it's always been a fairly like solitary activity for me. I've not This is probably the most I've talked about gardening with anybody ever.
Right, it's a private session thing,
It's
so
Yeah,
it's very
no,
cool.
it's good. No, it's largely trial and error, and then I'd say I've phoned home a few times to get some advice
Oh yeah,
from
does your
my.
family still professionally do this?
No, they got out of that business. So the greenhouses that sort of I had the role of picking some tomatoes in when I was young was they were in the middle of city limits basically. So at some point the land they were on was way more valuable than any fruit coming out of them. So but it's still there were some pro tips that came through occasionally, like you're screwing this up, you're overwatering them, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, okay. Is that the pro tip that like a layman would screw up? Like what's the thing that you like? What was the one thing if I had access to this super resource? Like what would they tell me?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's for me it was probably a rather specific like fruit splitting that I was getting with this one varietal because I hadn't seen anything else do that, and it was probably just overwatering largely. Yeah, no, neem oil is your friend for
What
early season mites. Neem
what
oil, yeah,
what is that word you're using? Oil and neem,
yeah,
NEAM.
NEEM oil
And
is it's a sort of natural insecticide effectively, and yeah, it's all the garden centers have it. People use it for indoor plants a lot, but I'll give it's supposed to very early season mites on the seedlings.
oh,
Um, it can help a lot if
how do I know if I have mites in my tomatoes?
you'll see little black spots all over it. The leaves will be basically being eaten or kind of mottled with insect damage. You'll see them there. They're pretty. I've had sort of black fly or I don't actually know what these insects are. I sort of know them by sight, but the little black aphidy things or whatever they are, they can do some damage.
Love it. All right, now I got a new tip. I'm going to keep an eye out for that. And some neem oil. Learn a new thing. At the end of the product here, like what's something you make out of this that's like you're like, oh, so you have the tomatoes. Like what's the dish you make or that like brings back home or really kind of nails their freshness? Like what's the go-to on this thing?
Well, so I mean, because I live in Wisconsin now, it's pretty easy to get hold of really good milk. So I'll make mozzarella, like fresh mozzarella, and then do a caprese. That's like
You're making your own mozzarella.
yeah.
Talk to me here. All right, you just dropped
Oh,
this on the last minute. Be like, hey, by the way, I just made my own mozzarella. Okay, so you
I
get
mean,
you get some beautiful unpasteurized milk. Then,
yep. It's
and are you going to the farm and getting it with a bucket, or are you just going to the actual grocery store?
no, you can't buy raw milk in a supermarket in Wisconsin, but you can be part of a club where they'll basically ship it to you in a cooler. Um, so you're getting sort of nice raw milk. You heat it. You're basically throwing rennet into it, and then you have to stretch the curds that form. It's sort of a like I'd say this is much simpler than people think, but it's also like you can just screw it up a lot of ways along the way.
I tried like 2 decades ago. I probably tried doing this. I bought Reddit online, and I
Yeah,
couldn't. It was always mealy. I really couldn't pull it. I couldn't tell if I couldn't get the temperature high enough, or put it was too high. It just never
yeah.
worked for me, and I tried hard on that stuff.
There's a microwave technique that I always thought was like ruining the purest vibe of this, but no, it works really well. But if you're not burning your hands, it's not hot enough. Like it's you should there's pain involved in making mozzarella. Like that's how it's you know it's going to turn out good.
I'm guessing you also grow basil in the backyard because there's no
Yeah,
way you're not growing basil in the backyard, right?
yeah, exactly.
And time it with the tomatoes. And then is this the Isla Caprese like or Isla Capri tomatoes, or are you using different ones for this?
Kind of what usually whatever looks good, whatever's ripe at the time. It's
Slice
just
them
an easy summer
nice.
thing.
Slice
Yep.
them nice. Take your big ball of mozzarella that you just made that might be still warm from your hands, and you
Yeah.
slice it down thin. A little chiffonade of basil on top or something like that.
Yep. That's the one. Yeah.
And then a nice fruity olive oil. Do you have one that you smuggled in as well, or is this a?
No, the olive oil is probably like not. I know that's one you can definitely go deep on, but I'm not that guy. I'll just buy like a decent olive oil from the, the supermarket.
And okay, so then we hit a little salt, a little
Bit of rock
crackly
salt.
salt,
Yeah.
a little pepper on that thing.
Pepper's going on. Yep.
And all
Essential.
right, is it okay? Here, question. This could be controversial. Like vinegar or no vinegar? That's always the.
Yeah. No, that's controversial in my house too. I'm a no balsamic guy.
Yeah.
Just because I think let the tomato flavor shine. I see the merits. It's perfectly delicious, but I no, I'm a purist in that regard.
I'm with you on that one. We have a debate in my family too on that one. And my wife's pro balsamic, and I'm like, keep it clean, right? Pick your poison on that stuff.
Well,
Okay,
you use the balsamic to mask a kind of crappy tomato. I mean, that's the thing. It's perfect. If you're using supermarket tomatoes, absolutely balsamic. But no, like I just spent 6 months obsessively growing this. Like we're not throwing balsamic on it.
Thank you. Thank you. Speaking truth here on this whole thing. Well, okay. By the way, before you're gonna have to send me some seeds if you're willing to. Like this is a pre-requirement before this airs and this whole thing. I gotta get this. I want to try your tomatoes in that way. It sounds really cool.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the seed saving is a whole process there because you've got to do lacto ferment.
Yeah, give me the 2 minute on that. Like, okay, end of the season.
Oh,
Yeah. Actually, like, what do we do here?
Yeah.
It's at the end of the season now. How do we get seeds?
Yeah. Oh yeah, you've got to just pulp a few tomatoes. Some people do the bagging the flowers so that you can end up with something that hasn't had bees cross pollinating with a different varietal. I'm not so worried. I can kind of pick them out, but yeah, you basically just lacto ferment them in water. You just put them in a little jar, cover them with water.
Wait, so I take a fruit. I take a fruit off the vine. I put it in a jar, cover it with water, and just let it.
Well, just the seed. You scrape the seeds out. You
Okay,
squeeze
so
out.
I cut it
just
out,
the
squeeze out the
seeds.
seeds, throw it into a jar of water.
Yep. Cover
And is
this
the tomato goo still on there, or am I like
a
washing
little
all
bit.
that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the process. Is basically that it's going to ferment for maybe like 3-4 days. You'll notice, and that pulp, the kind of casing that encloses the seeds, basically rots or is broken down, and then you just into a strainer and kind of I rinse them,
Yeah.
and then out on a tray to dry for a few days, and that's the seeds I use for the next year.
How do you not don't they sprout if you put them in there too long?
No, I think they'll just rot. It's you definitely want to get them dry pretty quickly. Not on a paper towel is my pro tip there, because they'll just stick, and then you will break them as you get them off. So just onto like a metal tray or something, or a porcelain plate, something.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. But you got to time it right. It sounds like you know the look of when to pull them out in this thing.
Yeah, I mean you'll notice that. I mean they start to they look and smell pretty horrible, and that means they're ready. I mean you'll know they're working because you just like dump them out, and the seeds they look like seeds you'd buy from a packet, basically just wet.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you have extras, definitely interested here on making
I got
this
you.
up. Yeah, I appreciate that. Some cross-state, interstate commerce here on this thing. All right. You've given us dropped a lot of knowledge here. If someone wants to get into this, like, where should they go? Like, what's a quickie? Like, what's something you actually like? Where'd you send them?
I like there's the guy, the M.I. Gardner YouTube channel. He's based in Michigan, I guess. I kind of like his style. I mean, it's just he's much more into sort of a professional end of things, but it's like this. How do you get a decent yield from like a small backyard garden? Is his premise. So I like his channel, but otherwise I don't know. Just like it's just seeds, just give it a try.
Let's try it.
Like,
all right. Well,
yeah,
for all
screw
these
it up a lot.
folks, like Gian says, just try it. I don't know. Many of you don't have tomato growing in your blood, but maybe you can start it on this generation. Or you can make it happen here. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's got a good feedback loop in terms of like either you like the taste of the thing you grew or you don't. If you don't, do something different.
Love it. Love it. Well, hey, Gian, I think that's it on my end. I know we didn't get to cars, but this was very fun. I appreciate you sharing all this stuff. Genuine interest on my part because I want to make mine better on this stuff, and maybe we'll trade. Like I'll find some Spigarella seeds and throw them your way or something like that.
Sounds good. Yeah, no, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Andrew Lau here. I hope you enjoy this episode of 5 to 9. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on our next episode. Who knows what hidden talents or hobbies we'll discover on the next episode of 5 to 9.